I want to just start out with a welcome to everyone and thank you for joining us today. Today's session is called the Trust Advantage Amplify plus UpContent in the AI era. And we really picked that title deliberately. We're in a moment where AI is everywhere in the buyer journey, and yet trust between buyers and sellers has really never been lower. And that's a paradox. It's also an opportunity for us. Over the next half hour, we're going to walk you through why your advocacy program is one of the most powerful trust building assets that you have right now. We're going to talk a little bit more about where programs get stuck and how Amplify plus UpContent solve those problems. And ideally, by the end of the session today, you'll see exactly what this looks like in your day to day. So we're going to take it away. So quick round of introductions, just so you know who's talking today. I'm Heather Blackwell. I'm the director of our account management team at Hootsuite in North America. I work directly with our Amplify customers, helping them get value out of our advocacy programs. And I have worked with many customers across different industries over my 10 plus years at Hootsuite. So have a little bit of experience. Also, somebody with a little bit of experience is Scott Rogerson, the CEO of UpContent. Scott and his team actually built the content curation engine that powers a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And then last but not least, we have Xander Isles, our strategic solutions consultant at Hootsuite. Xander lives in the product day to day, and he's going to walk us through what this actually looks like in action. So between the three of us, you're going to get a little bit of a mix of strategy. You're going to get the content side, and you're also going to get a hands-on view of the two products today. And just a quick housekeeping item, we do have the Q&A active. So if you do have questions throughout, we'd love to hear them from you all. We will have some time at the end of today's lunch and learn session to address all those questions live. So settle in. Hope you've got a little breakfast if you're on the West Coast, lunch if you're on the East Coast, and we'll get into the content here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, great, Heather. Thanks for getting us all together and excited to see some familiar names in the attendee list. So hopefully we'll get those questions throughout to make this really exciting. But to build on your last statement, this obviously wouldn't be a webinar in 2026 unless we talked about the letters A and I next to each other, but certainly a little bit different in this webinar and this conversation than probably maybe what you're seeing from some others. One of the things that we're seeing grow in its importance is obviously we're all using AI in many different ways, sometimes perhaps more successfully than other times in our attempts to leverage AI. And our buyers are too, right? So recent survey, no shock here, 94% of our buyers are using AI in some way. But that's also started to expand that chasm of trust even further, with only 45% of those same buyers trusting the sellers who are sending that messaging across. And one of the things that stands out to me was a conversation we were having with one of our customers, and she was talking about all the ways that their sellers are utilizing AI, and this was in professional services and the insurance side, whether it's video or content creation. And one of her statements was, well, why should we expect our clients and prospects to spend time consuming what we're creating if we're not willing to spend the time creating that and delivering it? And so trust is becoming that really coveted quality both at a brand level, but at the individual level as well. Who am I talking to and why should I trust what they're saying? Can they be the person to give me the right solution that I need right now, but also be a long-term partner? And so the ability to support our teams in distinguishing themselves and ensuring that their digital presence reflects who they actually are and allows them to showcase that expertise, even if they're not a marketer, I don't think it's ever been more important than it is right now.
And I think we just want to anchor everyone in the reality we know you and most marketers are living in. First, we've got more brands and smaller teams, right? The number of brands, business units, personal brands that marketers are being asked to manage really keeps growing, but headcount isn't growing with it. Secondly, we've got a bit of a content desert sometimes. The number one reason advocacy programs fail is that advocates run out of relevant, engaging content to share. So you can't really expect employees to be active and engaged if there's nothing that's really worth posting that they care to represent their brand with. And last but not least, the bottom line impact beyond beyond a content curation tool. Teams need the ability to measure not just indirect conversations, but direct conversations and what the impact is ultimately on the bottom line. Impressions is really not enough anymore, and leadership is looking for attribution. So ultimately, you've got a bigger mandate, you've got a smaller team, and the bar has been raised in terms of what you're being asked to deliver. And that's the pressure that we see a lot of marketers under. It's exactly the gap that we are aiming to solve with a combination of Amplify and content.
Yeah, awesome. And I can almost feel the group in the audience like tense up as you were going through some of that, Heather. Some of those challenges. I think we're all feeling those. And for those of you who are already utilizing employee advocacy or social selling, whether it is for new revenue or for talent acquisition, some of these things that you're seeing on this slide are probably already things that you're experiencing. And this is what we see in successful programs, of which we have hundreds between the two joint organizations. Engagement, obviously, on content that's shared by an individual is often 8 times greater than if it's shared by the organization. And when you aggregate the team who's sharing that content, obviously you're reaching more people in a better conversation, positioned in a better way than what we could ever do from a brand positioning, is even with spend going behind it. Trust is obviously the name of the webinar. And so seeing that greater trust of Heather sharing something on her LinkedIn profile versus our corporate brand sharing something, you're much more likely to resonate with that individual is sharing, because we know that it had to go through not only the brand's filtration, but also that individual's filtration of what they believe to be important to their audience. And you'll see more today, particularly when Xander is going through how we tie all these things together, that attributable revenue impact, more individuals sharing more consistently with content that's resonating with their audience in a way that we can attribute and drive that revenue back to conversion points and offline conversations, or conversations back from leased networks like a LinkedIn into your owned conversion channels. But not to just focus solely on social, as this group probably knows, from a search ranking perspective, particularly for businesses of which we work with often, where referral is a very large source of net new business. If someone says, go talk to Xander, what's the first thing I'm going to do? Either type it into a search engine or a chat bot, or go to LinkedIn directly and see who the heck this guy is and what he's talking about, what he's sharing. Is it someone that I actually want to talk to? Same is true from a talent acquisition standpoint. Obviously, we're employees sharing a job opportunity increases the amount of talented, qualified new candidates by about 3x on average. And then not only are they coming in at a more frequent rate, they're also moving through your hiring processes faster. And studies are showing that they're more likely to stay with that organization because they're working with people that are part of their network. And all of these things are able to be accomplished without a dollar of additional paid spend. Not to say this is free and you just turn it on and everything's good. There does obviously take strategy, but there are ways to do this in a strategic way that does reduce the burden on the team to manage this program and make sure that it is something that's worthwhile for that team and those individuals to want to take advantage of. And as Heather mentioned, content is one of those largest drivers of sustained adoption. And these numbers are things that we've been tracking across a number of customers. What we're seeing on average, and this is true really wherever trust is part of that transaction, is that 2 to 3 times the amount of audience engagement occurs for individuals who are sharing a mix of external third-party content as well as the firm created content. And then certainly if we can get them to share original content, then that's even better. But having that blend is where we see the most success. It's not about competing with that blog versus that external article or that video that the person is able to generate, but it's about how these things relate to one another and how the audience perceives that mix that you're creating. When we drill down a stage further, we often hear about these challenges that occur in programs, right? Adoption, getting people to consistently use the platform when we've run out of gift cards and pizza parties. How do we get people to continue doing it? How do we get the content that we're creating to perform in the way that makes sense for us to continue investing in it, the company created content? How do we address that need for diversity that our sales team's always complaining about? I would use it, but I don't have the type of content that I want to share all the time. How do we make sure that that's available without cloning our team to do so? And then if we're investing all of these resources, how do we ensure we're getting efficiency in that feedback loop and the traffic coming back to our domain? Well, when we see that mix of external content with original content, that amount of posting that goes on a per advocate level increases by about 80%. Not because they're going in and sharing absolutely everything under the sun, but because there's an expectation that new content will be available to them in that platform. And certainly on the Hootsuite side, there's lots of great ways to access that content in places that that team already resides and is spending time in their day. But to give them that extra nudge that there's something in here that's going to be interesting for you, and it's not only coming in once a month, it's coming in every day. And whether you want to share it or not, you can expect that new content will be there for you tomorrow or the next day. That's where we see that increase in overall adoption going on. But when we focus in on the content that probably the members on this call are creating and how that's performing, there's not this sometimes believed concern that introducing external content is going to overwhelm or overshadow or reduce the interest of our team for sharing our own firm created materials that we work so hard to produce. We actually see the opposite. That those individuals who are receiving external content along with firm content actually share 50% more firm content on a per person basis than if they were only given firm content. We've got a direct story in a second about that. But in addition to that, the audience is actually engaging with that firm created content more, showing about a lift of 10% on social interactions. So likes and comments on that content as well. The individuals are also sharing more of a diverse mix of content. So they're pulling from different interest areas versus maybe just posting the blog content when it comes out to the tune of about threefold. And perhaps most important, which really amplifies, no pun intended, the impact of your content overall, is that we see twice the amount of engagement on that link content that's being shared. So the content that's going to drive traffic back to those conversion points and not just leave that person on that network excited to engage, but not taking an action. We see twice the amount of action that's being taken. And so, this all ties together in making sure there's the content piece, but now we need that strategy piece as well. And how do we make it something that's valuable to them? So how they're interested in your views on how we tie this all together from a value proposition standpoint.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I think this is a great segue into really talking about what's in it for me. We've talked a little bit about obviously the results that sellers gain or advocates gain when they're sharing that third party content and getting excited, but there's other folks involved that need to benefit from this too, and that includes ultimately your organization, the employees. We've talked about them, whether they're sellers or general employees that are looking to advocate for the brand, and then ultimately the audience. And so what we know is that sustainable advocacy really only works when every single person, every one of these groups wins. That means every share and that means every time. So for the company, brand reach, new applicants, web traffic, opportunities, and ultimately revenue are what are most meaningful to the organization. For the employers, they're looking to build ultimately their personal brand, ideally building new connections, and having a real career opportunity here to build that personal brand. Again, network across more folks. They're not just doing it as a favor to the organization. They're investing in themselves with a program like this. And then last but not least, for the audience, they really want to, our audience, our consumers, our customers, they want to see content that's actually useful, that's authentic, that's entertaining, that's educational, not just another corporate broadcast. And I think we all know that, but it's an important reminder that the audience at the end of the day is the consumer of this content, and we really need to make it meaningful for them. So with all of these three overlapping, if you think of this as a little bit of a Venn diagram, um, this is when advocacy ultimately stops being a campaign and really starts becoming a habit for the organization, a habit for the employees, and a habit for the consumer, ultimately the audience. And that's the bar we're aiming to hit with these two solutions together. But I think it's important to also talk about where advocacy programs get stuck. If the what's in it for me for all those three audiences, the company, the employee, and the consumer is the goal, they fail when we don't reach those three audiences or we don't reach success in one of those three categories. And ultimately, there's four pressure points. The first one being adoption. So, how do we get people to actively use Amplify in the first place? Two is activity. Great. Once they're in, how do we keep them sharing consistently? Not just once, but week over week, month over month. Three is the engagement. Again, we need to make content that they actually want to share, that they're interested in telling their network about. And four is attribution. We need to be able to prove that this content is actually working and that it's driving an impact to the bottom line and that leaders can see those results. Adoption, activity, engagement, attribution. These are the four things that every advocacy program ultimately is going to live and die on. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about how we solve these.
Yeah, so if you flip those upside down, because I think you had mentioned a few really important things there, Heather, that what's in it for me is really critical, right? So how do we think that for those three audiences all the way through? And what's great about everything that we've shared to this point, is that you really don't need technologies to solve this. It's just a heck of a lot easier when you have them. Like these are very strategic thought processes of how do we make sure we get that team engaged. And no surprise that adoption, we see the highest correlation with the type and consistency of fresh content being made available to them. If I go in on Monday, I see some great stuff and I share it, and I come back on Wednesday or the following Monday and it's the same stuff that I saw that past Monday, it's exponentially harder to get me to come back in again. And so now I have a first impression that, okay, that's what this tool is. If they want me to share something, I'll go there. We lose the what's in it for me, and we don't even get a chance to showcase that. Then there's that bit of an endorphin hit when I do share something and I see some of that engagement, and giving that individual a opportunity to pick what they want to share versus seeing themselves sharing all the same things that the person next to them is sharing allows them to see this again as an investment in them versus a favor, to your point. They get those clicks and that engagement. You saw some of the statistics that we see when you're blending these together. And then ultimately utilizing some of the direct capabilities that we have, both on the original content that you're making available to them to drive traffic to conversion points, and using some of the ingrained capabilities within Hootsuite's link campaigns to easily measure that attribution, but also utilizing perhaps a way to capture that attribution on the third-party content as well and drive traffic back through some of the call to action banners. These are all layers upon one another. And so you're just exponentially increasing the value of each of these layers, depending on where you're currently stuck in that program and how we build upon it. And one of the high level views, and this will certainly be available, but to touch on quickly in the next slide, is that, again, this isn't just about one type of content competing against another. We really see the greatest impact when we're blending these together. And this was from a firm that was initially quite reluctant to include external content into their mix because they were creating really great original content. But when we were able to test this for a quarter, what they noticed was that at the end of the quarter, when they created that blend of content, their team was sharing twice as much firm created content than they were in the quarter prior, even though it was now only 40% of the total content that was made available. And just like you saw before, it wasn't just about the activity and the sharing, it was also about the engagement and the conversions that came off of it.
And just to leave everybody with one more example before we get to see this in action with Xander, another great example is with a Canadian insurance and financial services firm. And I think the key takeaway here is when we've talked about the bottom line impact, and what you can actually see just on the right hand side of the screen is that this is the type of program that's getting the attention of the CFO for a financial firm. Why? Because they actually saw 4% increase in assets under management through this program. Obviously, there's a lot of precursors to that, driving higher engagement, like Forex engagement here through advisor shares, increase in lead conversion, 9 leads generated per advisor per month in this type of setting. And the fix really for them was a proper content mix, branded materials alongside curated third-party content that advisors could confidently share with prospects. And again, with that confidence for them, compliance is obviously really important in a financial services environment. So, a really successful program, again, getting the CFO's attention with that AUM increase. So, with that, we're going to pass it over to Xander to give you a chance to see what this looks like in your day to day. So, without further ado, I will stop sharing and Xander, let you take over.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we've talked a ton about how this provides company value, whether that's new opportunities in marketing, maybe differentiating from the paid spend or paid campaigns that are active and really engaging your employees. Another, point that we haven't talked about a lot today is ease of use for employees to keep that adoption up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ease of use for employees and give them the tools to facilitate some of this content sharing, and then I'm going to pass over to Scott to talk about the UpContent side and where third party comes into the mix. So to first start with the ease of use of the Amplify platform. I'll navigate you to the left-hand side. Here we are from an end user experience. And you'll see here from a Hootsuite employee's perspective, our marketing team has done a fantastic job giving us quite a diverse mix of content that I can comb through, find something that's relevant to me and my audience, and share. As far as finding the content, there are really simple tools from this end user dashboard to search for things I'm interested in. I can filter my dashboard to be really specific to a particular media type or maybe a social network like LinkedIn if that's what's being prioritized. And I can always find new and exciting content by subscribing to new topics here or discover something that I might not already be following. We've introduced some AI tools. As mentioned, that's a huge component in all of our work. So we've recently launched a auto sharing tool for LinkedIn, which encourages employees to set up a schedule for the week and follow along some AI best time to publish recommendations that Hootsuite's tracked over years of programs like this, making it really easy for the end users to get things out on a meaningful basis. Now, as far as sharing content, just the practical use of this, once I find something as an employee that I find interesting, I simply tap share. I can schedule it to a personal social network. You'll see my LinkedIn page here. I can choose to share it directly, schedule it, or even personalize it. So if you give your advocates the ability to add their own tone and language, which can also increase awareness and engagement by adding their own tone and flavor, that's totally possible here as well. Now, what's really interesting about this program is you'll see a lot of our marketing topics are more leaning towards Hootsuite. However, we do have this industry news category. So this is being funneled by the UpContent piece, which Scott will talk about in a moment, which is all third-party content. So our marketing team has repurposed things that we're finding in marketing news, blogs, etc., that would be relevant for me as an employee to engage my audience in a new way. So beyond strictly having corporate assets here from the Hootsuite side, I have some really exciting new, news and market releases, things in digital marketing that I could engage my audience with. Now, a question that often comes up is, let's say as an employee, I share something third party related. How do we hold on to that traffic if I'm driving something to maybe a Forbes news article? And so you'll see here something that we built, which is really handy and creative, is this call to action banner that layers on top of third party content. So Tarek here, he's one of our most active Amplify users here at Hootsuite. He's on the customer account management team. He's recently shared a Shopify article driving information and traffic around brand strategy and a little bit of a disclaimer around a particular looks like B brand in healthcare, it looks like. We also have his banner layered on top of this post. So what's really cool about this is if you see in the URL bar, we link it back to an individual, and there's some attribution that we can build around this. So for sales folk, for people in talent acquisition, for people that are tracking or have KPIs around the traffic that they're generating, this can be a really useful way to hang on to that traffic that we've generated. Now, that's it from an end user perspective. So a quick glance at to what they would see from a desktop experience. Hootsuite Amplify also runs on iOS and Android for folks that are on the go and prefer to use the mobile app. Now, from the admin point of view, there's a number of admin tools. You'll see here we can always get into these in a future demo if you're more interested in the Hootsuite admin experience. But from the content side, this is where UpContent and Curate comes into play. So Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to let you talk about your bread and butter here.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of the high notes. So the one thing that I'll note just very quickly is that for over 90% of our customers, this is a view that they're very rarely accessing, right? This is something that we're using to optimize the type of content that's being delivered, just like what Xander was showing. That industry news area is following specific rules that Hootsuite team has defined to make sure that not only is the content interesting and relevant, but it's also not mentioning competitors. And for groups in financial services, that it's meeting their industry compliance requirements and then is automatically being delivered into Amplify so that that team can stay focused on the great original content assets that they're creating. And it also creates that objectivity for the individuals that are sharing. Based upon what's shared, then it is learning what's working and what's not. So that industry news area is constantly improving and aligning with what's of interest. So we were able to allow that ease of use that Xander was talking about, getting it into the places that the team's already spending their time, giving them the content that they're interested in, and then also creating that direct link back to the original content asset where we want to drive traffic now that we've engaged them with that external content, all without this team, from an admin perspective, really having to do much on a day-to-day as it relates to the external content, and the individual seller simply, the ask is find and share what you're interested in. Hard stop. Everything else is taken care of for them, and that's where we see the sustained success of these programs, where for other technologies that focus purely on just distribution, we don't see that success.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Xander. The Hootsuite and UpContent teams are more than happy to connect with you as a follow-up to this. So please do feel free to reach out, particularly to the individual who invited you, generally your account manager or CSM. We'd love to hear from you and answer again any questions that pop into your mind when you're thinking about this later today. But otherwise, thank you very much to everyone for being here. Thank you to our presenters, to Scott and to Xander. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon.